minus that technical issue. So today we continue on, and I think this happens to be week number 70 of the Sutta Exploration series. And it's the sutta that I'll be talking about is a very important sutta, because oftentimes when we talk about the earliest tradition of Buddhism, of the teachings of Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, for some reason, people avoid talking about this subject, the principle of suññatā, of voidness or emptiness, which ironically enough had been the main motif of a far later tradition that showed up at least 600-700 years later, after the demise, the death of Lord Buddha, and that is the Mahayana. So they had been a big, promoters of that, but it didn't start with the Mahayana. There were different schools of Buddhism that wanted to actually create this supremacy over others, because it's all about support, gaining support. So the more sophisticated you sounded, the more intangible you sounded, the culture that the monks were living in seemed to celebrate that within the Sangha. So what you had over time were these cultural developments, if we can call them developments, where people were going away from the practice as such. You also had, let's not forget, the Abhidhamma tradition coming up, and they were also promoting their own agenda. Abhi means the greater Dhamma, the superior Dhamma, Abhidhamma. So what you had were individuals who were promulgating other than what Lord Buddha taught, because it was easier, because it all went to, okay, follow the money principle, wherever they were getting support from, recognition by the leading authorities, the rulers, and the community of the dayakas, or the supporters. So the more complicated, the more complex things began to be in the teachings, the more people felt they were disconnected. So then the focus became more on the studying of the suttas, studying of the commentaries specifically. So what you had were the commentators. The situation was commentators were willingly, intentionally avoiding talking about the suññatā, which Lord Buddha talked about specifically and in detail within the Pali canon. So several months ago, I think it was last year, I covered with you the Majjhima Nikāya 122, MN 122, which is the Mahasuññatā Sutta. And this happens to be the one preceding it, namely the Cūḻa Suññatā. Cūla means shorter, or shorter discourse on emptiness or voidness. So that will be the sutta for today. It's a long sutta, and perhaps it's much better for me to just dive in and stop as necessary to discuss the sutta as we go on. So again, this is the Cūla Suññatā, shorter discourse on emptiness, Majjhima Nikāya 121. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was staying in the palace, monastery, donated by Megada's mother in the city of Savatthi at the eastern grove. Then, when it was nearly evening, the Venerable Ananda came out from his meditative seclusion and went to the Blessed One. After paying his respects, he sat to one side and said, Bhante, I remember one time when the Blessed One was living within the Sakyan district at a town called Nagaraka. The Blessed One himself spoke to me these words and said, Nowadays, Ananda, I primarily practice the meditation on emptiness. Bhante, did I hear you correctly? Am I recalling and relating back accurately to the teacher what the Blessed One had spoken to me himself? For I do not want to be misspeaking the words of the Tathagata, nor misrepresenting him. This is the appropriate way of quoting someone, in a sense, especially in their presence. But in this case, it's a practical approach. And Venerable Ananda is also trying to set a precedent for all those who come across this interaction between Lord Buddha and himself as to the proper way of relating back to a teacher what you have heard. Is this true, Bhante? This is what I thought you said. This is what I heard you say. Instead of just saying, no, my memory is accurate, because we don't know if our memory is that accurate. We would like it to be. So we have a lot of attachment to our emotions when we speak something, when we say something. So we owe it to the truth to come out and say it and ask to the person. It doesn't have to be one's teacher, of course, but in this case, it's Lord Buddha. And Venerable Ananda is trying to see if what he heard, and Venerable Ananda, don't forget, had a photographic memory. So he knew that what Lord Buddha had said was that, but he's trying to fish for more information. He's trying to fish for more instruction. And let's see what Lord Buddha says. Yes, Ananda, you did hear me correctly, for you are recalling and relating back accurately to the teacher what I had spoken to you myself. Therefore, you are not misspeaking the words of the Tathagata, nor misrepresenting him. Indeed, Ananda, as in the past, now also I primarily practice the meditation on emptiness. It's a practice. It's not a philosophical state like it came to be known in the Mahayana. It's a practice. It's not like you have in certain, like born again something, right? People say, I have done this. I have given myself to this divinity, to this higher being. And that's the end of the story. Let's pack up and go home because we've done it. The spiritual task is complete. And now we just wait for the, well, show to end, life to end, and I'm going to be in heaven type of a thing. That is not suññata. That is not emptiness. I bring that example in here because oftentimes this is what we have to this day in other traditions, and specifically in Mahayana and Vajrayana. It's still being taught as such, as a philosophical level of attainment, where once one reaches, then it's a level of perceptive way of, okay, no, I get it. And that's it. So you don't have to work on anything else anymore. Sila, Samadhi, Panya are no longer necessary. And that's what happened with the Heart Sutra and others, which is wrongly attributed to Venerable Nagarjuna, who's blamed oftentimes by, guess who? The Theravadan monks, as the person who created the division or blasphemed, if you will, the teachings of Lord Buddha. That was not the case. But they brought in over centuries later Heart Sutra that says form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and then they try to look at everything being deducible to the realization of emptiness. And at that point, nothing really matters. So what you had were monks to this day saying their actions really don't matter because they live on a different realm of understanding, meaning they have realized emptiness. So their behavior no longer is really important because they have penetrated the depth of it. You have teachers who say, passions are okay, monks. Passions are okay, so long as you understand the empty nature of them, their voidness, so it's okay. Being married for a monk, indulging in sexual behaviors or stimulations, sensual stimulations, because you have penetrated the depth of the Dhamma. You see the Dhamma and you see it everywhere, even in sensuality. All this is corruptions of the mind. All this is stupidity, not Dhamma. It is adhamma. So this is not what Lord Buddha is talking about, that he was practicing his meditation as the object of his meditation being on emptiness itself. Ananda, just as you see here in this palace monastery of Migara's mother, which is empty of elephants, cattle, horses, gold or silver, empty of any assemblies of men and women, yet the non-emptiness or presence of something else, namely the Sangha of Bhikkhus, is here, the only single presence here. In the same way, the Bhikkhu, by not thinking about nor becoming lost in memories of village life or the people in it, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of being in a remote wilderness. So, some have said that the state of emptiness as a meditation practice is something that is only preserved, only unique to the Buddhas. That I disagree with. Why? Because Lord Buddha is giving us the how-to. This is the first step. He's giving us the environment. This is happening at Visakha's monastery that she built for Lord Buddha and the monks. So there's no elephants there. It's a monastery. There's no dogs, no thing, nothing there other than just the assembly of monks. So Lord Buddha is using the image, in this case, the absence of certain entities, let's say animals, elephants being the big one, and other animals. So in the absence of those things, what is left is just one group of beings, one obvious presence, namely the Sangha. So this is helping to basically holding the hand of the meditating monk to become acclimated to what it would turn into eventually, to the practice of meditation on emptiness. Because you need to do it gradually. It's sometimes strange that people say, without having gone into any of the jhanas, they want to just go ahead and shoot up straight into the meditation on emptiness. That simply cannot happen. The mind is not prepared. It's impossible. You're just fooling yourself. Like people who say, I'm a sotapanna, or I attain to 5th or 6th jhanas or something. And then you look at their behavior. Nothing says that they're there, except for them. Their lips are saying it. So this is a gradual process. My grandmother, for example, used to, in the summertime especially, she would buy raw green olives. And I loved olives, I still do, like the taste of it, because well, it's very nutritious, and I grew up with all these memories attached to them, of course. But I would take, let's say, a single green olive and try to put it in my mouth, and my grandmother would just snap it away and say, "Don't do that because it's poisonous." I say, "Why?" Because it's still very raw. It's not done yet. So what she had this wooden, like a mallet, and then a hammer, and then this marble stone, flat, thing. And then she would put one or sometimes 3 or 4 of them, and then she would just gently smash them, so that it would break the skin of the olive, because it would be very tough. And then she would put them in a jar filled with salt and fresh lemons. And then once it's full, she would add some water, and then she would close it, from what I remember, really tight, protecting it to preserve it. Now, I would wait week after week. I would just go and ask, "Grandma, is it ready yet? Can I eat the olives?" And she would say no. So my very mundane or banal example is trying to serve a purpose here, to indicate that without having at least this very first step that Lord Buddha is talking about, first you need to look around and just localize, fix your focus on one thing, instead of try to jump straight to some type of a sublime state, like in this case, suññatā. It's not going to work otherwise. So similarly, you have to wait. It's a gradual process. In the case of the olive, it's the process of fermentation. You need to give it time. There's a process. By having only this single perception of being in a remote wilderness, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, springing forward to it. This is a term we're going to see several times, I think, 6 or 8 times, where the mind is going to, once it doesn't have those distractions, and that's another reason why it's so crucial for the meditator to be secluded. Without seclusion, there cannot be meditative progress. Okay? And definitely without seclusion, jhanas won't happen. And if the jhanas aren't happening, states of nobility aren't going to happen either. Meaning, at the very least, sotapatti. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of the village now is no longer present in him. Similarly, remember, the village, in contrast to the seclusion of the forest, it's a contrast, right? It's hugely different. One is occupied with agitation, with movement, it's full of dynamism. Things are happening. It's very dynamic. People relationships, this, that, this is so-and-so's husband, this is so-and-so's son, da-da-da-da-da. But that's another reason why we go forth and leave everything behind, to do the thing that needs to be done, to reduce the agitation. Otherwise, he is bringing agitation of the village with him into his hermitage in the middle of a forest or a jungle that has no beings, including no elephants. It's just him sitting in his kuti, meditating, but the agitation is with him. So meditation like this, however, will allow the bhikkhu to extract himself and see at least, oh, there is agitation. But as the practitioner goes deeper, he understands the village is not here. Therefore, there's no point in me bringing the village along with me into my sit. And therefore, he says, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of people now is no longer present in him. then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of a single perception of being in a remote wilderness. The mind is still agitated because it looks around and sees, oh, there's trees, there's this, there's that, there's no people. But the agitation that is naturally to occur when the person is alone in the forest or secluded place, such as, oh, what was that sound? Especially at night. Is somebody approaching? Or is that a snake that I'm like, what is that moving? All these are naturally occurring agitations, which he still has to overcome, despite the fact that he's in a remote wilderness. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. So there needs to be the sati and sampajanya. He is not putting himself into a trance-like state, trying to create something that isn't there. Instead, he is looking at things the way they are, which is the essence of vipassana. Ananda, in this manner, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. So he's tasting some level of suññatā, Lord Buddha is saying, when he's able to see that. Because you are secluding yourself from the noise. You're removing yourself from the agitation. In essence, you're going from a state of, quote unquote, fullness of things to a state of, quote, emptiness of things. Those things could be your perceptions, your thoughts, your feelings, your everything that you carry around with you, causing agitation in the heart, in the mind. So slowly, slowly, Lord Buddha is going to guide the meditator into suññatā. Furthermore, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not thinking about people or of being in a remote wilderness, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of solid earth. So now he's going beyond the fact that he is in a place that is, well, he can have a relationship with, direct relationship with. It's tangible, such as the leaves on the trees, the wilderness, maybe the wild boar that ran across, or the sound of the peacock, or the peacock hanging around his kuti, or the snake that is trying to crawl in and trying to look for rats or mice. These have form. This is the wilderness. But when it comes to the earth, now it's a little bit more, you could say, abstract, even though it's there. He could feel it. He could touch the ground with it, with his feet, and feel the earth. So here is where the limited perception of the meditator becomes a little bit, he's pushing the boundaries, because he's no longer talking about just this solitary remote wilderness area, but the earth element, which extends, is vast beyond the monastery, beyond the solitary confines of this wilderness area, his makeshift hermitage, if you will. Solid earth. By having only this single perception of solid earth, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. Leaps, jumps, springs forward to it with confidence. In Pali, it's pakandati, pakandati. In life, we need to do that. If somebody gives you instructions to make something, if you're cooking something, if you're about to do a certain task which you've admired others when they did that task, and you relied on them, it could be something like writing a paper or writing a book, or riding a bicycle. And when it comes to your turn, you won't be successful unless you develop the confidence to spring to it, forward into it. Confidence in what? Not in the thing, but in yourself. That I can do this. The timidity has to be dropped, abandoned, which also comes from being afraid. Saying, I don't know. I don't know, and I cannot know. That's why I rely on you to do this for me. That is not the path of Dhamma. And that will not allow us to taste the Dhamma. You need to break the bonds of fear that this could happen to everyone else except for me. So I have to accept this. That is not the proper way of practice, of understanding the Dhamma. And Lord Buddha gives us a simile here. Just as the bull's hide becomes free from any crinkles or creases, turning smooth when stretched by 100 pins fastening it, in a similar manner, the bhikkhu, by not paying attention to the various terrains, hills, inaccessible gorges, rivers, ravines, thick forests, rugged mountains, and other uneven topographical features of earth, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of solid earth. Otherwise, it's the same thing. So you're either thinking about remote wilderness, or you're thinking about mountains, you're thinking about rivers, trees. No, he's saying go beyond them. And look at them as just the solid earth element, if you will. That's what he's saying. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of people, now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of being in a remote wilderness, now is no longer present in him either. So first he started with pulling himself away from people, and the agitation that he had as a result of the people that he encountered, including Sangha, is no more. And now he was all by himself in the wilderness, minus all those people. So even the wilderness now is drifting away from his awareness. He's not seeing the wilderness, the trees, the bridges, or whatever. Anything in the wilderness, he's no longer seeing that. He's beyond it, but he is now observing the single perception of solid earth. He then knows and sees that his perceiving is empty of the perception of people as well as the perception of being in a remote wilderness. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that it is due to the perception of solid earth. Because every perception will trigger a movement in the mind, in the brain. Every time you have a perception. That's why in the Magandhya Sutta, I think it was, Lord Buddha says, Sanya viratassa nasanti gantha, panya vimuttassa nasanti moha. For the person who has detached oneself from perception, there cannot be no bonds, shackles. For the person who has liberated oneself through wisdom, there cannot be any more delusions. The movement of the mind is crucial. As your meditation goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, you become more sensitive to the tiniest little fluctuations. Even the thought, a single thought of solid earth becomes a pain. When I was a child, there was a, they would read us these fairy tale stories, and I guess Mother Goose type of stories. And there was one story that really stuck in my head over the years. And that was about this princess I think, who had left the palace, or somehow she was kidnapped, and she found herself in a house where she was being taken care of by these people, or I don't know who it was. And basically the bottom line is that she says she claims to be a princess and they don't believe her. But one person says, well, let us test her. So they get 7 mattresses placed one on top of each other. And then one of them goes and gets a small little pebble, I think. I know I'm paraphrasing from what I remember. And it's like tiny little seed, and they place it at the bottom of the first mattress. And she goes to sleep all the way up there, almost touching the ceiling. And the next morning, they ask her, oh, so how did you sleep? And she says, everything was fine, except for I have this terrible backache. It's hurting as if I was sleeping on a piece of rock. Something was poking me. And they turn to each other and they say, this is a princess we're talking about now. They're really a princess. So similarly, even that thought becomes a pain, a thorn in the side of the meditator, if you will. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. See, he doesn't go around telling people, I've attained. Yes, I've attained. Yes, I made it. I've experienced Suññatā. Thank you very much. No, this is what is absent today. People are not scrutinizing themselves in relation to their practice. Everybody's just ready to go ahead and hit Instagram, hit Facebook, hit social something, let one's own surrounding, or becoming a teacher and telling students, yes, or insinuating, hinting at without even saying, but giving the impression, nevertheless, which is the 4th precept being broken, that they indeed have attained something, which, by the way, they haven't. Scrutiny is extremely important. That is the essence of vipassana. You're trying to find out. That's what Lord Buddha did as Bodhisattva, Gautama. 6.5 years, torture. His own teachers that said, come and be the teacher. The 5 students were always around him, treating him as their teacher. So he had everything working for him, except for the fact that he had not attained. How many meditators today live with that credo, with that drive? Not many. That's why this bhikkhu is a perfect example of what we need to be doing as meditators. No, I have still more work to do. Again, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of being in a remote wilderness, nor to the perception of solid earth, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of infinity of space. Earlier, I was talking about contrast, right? The village, noise, all that. And the solitary, remote environment where you're the only person. If something happens to you, you're by yourself. But it doesn't have those people running around, dogs barking, elephants running around. You're by yourself. So then we went to the earth. And now, solidity, and then you have the absence of the solidity, infinity of space. That's why it doesn't work for a meditator to just straight away try to jump into meditating with this as their object, infinity of space. It will not work because you, first of all, don't have the concept of solid earth. You haven't meditated on it yet. You haven't perfected it yet. I used to tell individuals when I was in education, It didn't matter if they were high school students or college, university students, apparently, because people have the same drive. And I remember bringing up this example, like, if you want to run a 100-meter sprint, a dash, Olympic level, top of the best runners in the world. If you want to run that fast in that short of a time, you need to learn how to properly know how to run. Just regularly to run, first of all. Before that, you need to know how to walk. Meanwhile, the person who's saying, I want to do this, cannot even properly crawl. That's the culture of, self-entitlement that we have going. And it's not just with, millennials, I have to say. People are, feeling like, yeah, if I give 1 hour a day, I should attain, I should levitate. I was somewhere the other, a few months, a month and a half ago. And this woman came, not a Buddhist, but the first sentence, she says, I've been meditating for 35 years, learning to levitate. It was a perfect opportunity for me to just say, well, did you? I didn't. It was tempted, but simply because we put some time during the day, we expect to get results as big as this, suññatā, or even the dropping of agitation. It requires work. That's why I insist that it's not pujas. Many places in the world, not just in Asia, people don't like it when I say those words, but it's not coming from me. I'm just about to finish, actually. I'm putting the finishing touches. Ayya Damadina, she's doing the proofreading. So anytime today, tomorrow, or this couple of days, I will be able to finally finish the Sutta Nipāta. And this week, the computer just didn't work with me. So I finally got a new computer with some support from students, highly appreciated. But the book will be out within the next few days, at least on the PDF. Eventually, I would like it to get enough donations so that I can have that be a hard copy print in each of your hands. That's my goal, of course, free of charge. But in it, Sutta Nipāta, it's mind-blowingly beautiful. It's so pertinent. Makes you think and ask, where did the Dhamma go? When you read those suttas, where did Lord Buddha's teaching go? What is this all nonsense about pujas and this and that? He's talking against hearsay. He's talking against the tradition that carries over from one generation to the next, following tradition, or the pure following of precepts or rites and rituals as the practice of Dhamma, as being a Buddhist. Again and again. Where is that today? So when we're practicing, we cannot have this sense of entitlement. So don't come to me saying, well, I've been sitting every day for 1 hour every day, Bhante. So how come my mind is still agitated? Well, are you doing the other things like practicing sila? Are you leaking? Who are you hanging out with? What is it that your eyes are exposed to during the day, even for a certain time, like a few minutes? How are you dealing in your relationships with others? Are you still putting other people down? Are you still pointing the finger at other people and blaming them for your mistakes, which you don't want to see? So that 1 hour of meditation is not going to do anything, pretty much, so long as your behavior hasn't changed. So the Dhamma is very much personal. It's about you. It's not some philosophical thing. As your practice develops, and it can only develop when you see also changes happening in your behavior in life, then you start seeing the impact of your perceptions on the way you live your life. And there are tools which Lord Buddha is eloquently, beautifully delineating for us. And now we're getting into the infinity of space. So the mind of the meditator jumps to it, leaps into it with confidence, becoming bright and gets settled in it. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of being in a remote wilderness now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of solid earth now is no longer present in him. So he's dropping the previous meditation object. The solid earth, the perception of it, was his object. But as he moved into the infinity of space, the allowing of his mind, for his mind to digest that, accept that possibility, the solid earth meditation object drifts away. He doesn't get agitated. Oh, where's the solid earth? No, because he has had enough equanimity, upekkha, to still remain balanced. That's why he's now able to go into an infinity of space. And then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of a single perception of infinity of space. So even that is agitation. Remember what I was saying about the princess and the seed, the bead or the pebble? He then knows and sees that his perceiving is empty of the perception of being in a remote wilderness and is empty of the perception of solid earth. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that it is due to the perception of infinity of space. So even infinity of space is producing that agitation. This is not something that can be picked up, seen, or even examined by someone who is on a much grosser level of mental functioning, because they're lost in heavy duty, mental transactions, if you will. Like this is similar to when you're in a noisy room or in the middle of the very busy street. There's so many different types of noises coming at you. But the loudest ones will cover up the more subtle ones. Like you will not hear the microwave static, which if you sit carefully in a quiet room, let's say sensory deprivation type of a room, you will begin to experience that fuzziness, the one that you see also in the old television tubes, television sets, the static, or even when you're listening to going through the broadcast stations or radio stations, and that static, it's the microwave, the background noise of the of the universe. But that's always happening. It doesn't stop when you turn on something loud, But as the mind is becoming quieter and quieter, less agitation, you start detecting finer and finer levels of agitation. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the Bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of solid earth, nor paying attention to the perception of infinity of space, gives attention instead to the single perception of that of infinity of consciousness. So this is also talking about the arupa jhanas, by the way. When you move from the rupa jhanas, the fourth, you go into the first arupa jhanas, or the fifth jhana, if you want to look at it in those terms. Then you go to the next one, which happens to be the sixth. jhana, which in this case is the infinity of consciousness. So this is where the consciousness feels. The person feels like they're spread out. They're like, some people, because they're not stable in it, they've come in and out of this state, and it makes them feel very woozy and sometimes even agitated because of it. They forget to apply equanimity. They want something more solid. That's why they drop down to something more solid, like the earth element, to meditate on. By having only this single perception of infinity of consciousness, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. The curiosity of a child is necessary. Playfulness in the attitude to find out what's next. Remember, this person was not immediately, when they started meditating, they didn't just start from infinitive consciousness. They started with being in the crowd, in the village, then into the monastery, then in the solitary wilderness, then in just feeling the earth element, and then space element. Now it's consciousness. So they are pushing the envelope of their capacity to be mindful and to see and watch the mind without interfering. This is key. And for this reason, there cannot be thinking or pondering going on in the mind of the meditator. There cannot. Because that means you're jumped out of it already. Because thinking and pondering, remember, it's perceptions, right? If you have them in the mind, thinking and pondering, you will drop out of that very, very refined state, which still has more room to go and to develop into. By having only this single perception of infinity of consciousness, his mind springs forward to it with God. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of solid earth now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of infinity of space now is no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of the single perception of infinity of consciousness. Same principle, just becoming more refined. He then knows and sees that his perceiving is empty of the perception of solid earth as well as the perception of infinity of space. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that it is due to the perception of infinity of consciousness. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. It takes insight, penetrative insight, to look for those gaps. And that's what he's recognizing. Ultimately, wait a minute, when this thought is not there, and then it is, and then it's not there, and then it is. What happened there in between these two thoughts, these two perceptions? What was that? It felt great. It felt absolute quiet. It felt liberating. So that curiosity is crucial to be maintained. That's going to be taking this person straight to Nibbana if he or she perseveres on this path. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the Bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of infinity of space, nor paying attention to the perception of infinity of consciousness, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of the base of nothingness. Now, this is different than Suññatā. Okay, so this is, sometimes people get confused. That's why some translators wanted to avoid this confusion, and they call it Suññatā, they call it emptiness or voidness. which I like to use also. And he understands that versus the seventh jhana, which is what we're talking about. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of infinity of space now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of infinity of consciousness now is no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of the single perception, of that of the base of nothingness. So that also will create agitation. Again, as the case was with Alara Kalama, Bodhisattva Gautama's first teacher, he had reached that stage of attainment. And he thought that that's it. He made it. And he had surrounded himself with so many students who were just dying for him to teach them to get to this level as their liberation. But they were also honest enough to answer Lord Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, when he asked them whether they are freed, liberated from the asanas, because he had attained to the same stage and he was having a serious problem because what he was taught was not true, because he still had the asanas. And they said, this is the best we could do. And they also had the asavas, the contaminants of the heart, contaminants of the mind. They were defiled. The heart was still defiled, despite the fact that it's reached this high level of attainment. Mental calm. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that is due to the perception of the base of nothingness. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. Again, though, he's seeing that there are moments when there is absolute emptiness, but they're so slippery. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present, the agitation. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the Bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of infinity of consciousness, nor paying attention to the perception of the base of nothingness, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So now we're going to the eighth jhana, base of neither perception nor non-perception, where the person does not know that state until they come out of it, that they were in that state. Nor can they say, now I'm going to enter that state before they enter it. So by having only this single perception of the base of neither perception, even though it says single perception, so we have to be careful on this play on words, the mental state, being aware of this, even in hindsight, his mind springs forward to it with confidence. You are relying on this. So there's a confidence level that grew in you towards this thing. You know this is good. You know this is, this is like the highest I've come. So that makes your mind become more bright. You become more trusting of the process. And the mind gets settled in it. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of infinity of consciousness now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of the base of nothingness now is no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of the single perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is one of the reasons why a lot of translators avoid the repetitions, because the human brain doesn't like repetitions. So please push yourself to resist lethargy, mental lethargy. Even if you're able to push aside the physical lethargy, the mind is even more important for you to keep it sharp. So there's a reason why Lord Buddha taught these. He didn't say ... by the way, Ananda, you go and figure it out. I've said it in sutta number, XYZ over there. You go and figure. No, he's repeating these things. That's the least you could do for yourself, as well as of the perception of the base of nothing. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, even in that state, but that it is due to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. He doesn't say, okay, where's the fanfare? Where's the celebration? I became an arahant. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He still knows they have work to do. Ananda, in this manner, also the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. So he's becoming more confident in the presence of suññatā. The emptiness is coming through because he's realizing something else also. He's realizing that there is no security and safety in any of these states. None can give him that security and safety that Nibbana does provide. And that's where the trust comes in, the saddha, the confidence, the faith in the Buddha that he attained. Read the suttas, you'll see it. He went beyond these. These are not it. Well, I also know it's not it because I'm feeling these things, X, Y, and Z. I'm not comfortable. I'm agitated. Da, da, da. Okay, you need that honesty with yourself. But you're also experiencing this wonderful journey. Okay, so there is, I shouldn't give up. I shouldn't give up. That's what Lord Buddha is saying. Pure experience of emptiness starts to burst. Further on, Ananda, the Bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of the base of nothingness, nor paying attention to the perception of base of neither perception nor non-perception, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of the signless collectedness of the heart. Animitta ceto vimutti. Animitta means the signless, the signless. Signs are not necessarily things outside, like some people have been saying, or even commentators, modern commentators, translators even, of the suttas. Unfortunately, that is completely wrong, because who cares about that? Because the person has gone so deep. They're not talking about outside signs. They're talking about the object of meditation, which turns into a sign, nimitta. Whether it's the breath, it doesn't have to be visual either, by the way. It could be the touch, the feel of the breath. Sometimes it would be very fuzzy, or sometimes you actually have light, or sometimes you have the clinging on to that object. All these categorize themselves as different forms of signs. So we need to be aware of this, because ultimately, I think it was in the Mahavedalla or Cūla Sutta, where it says, the Venerables say, lust, raga, is a sign maker. Lust, the longing, the yearning for something, makes you have signs, nimittas in your mind. And so long as you have signs, you will not be experiencing emptiness. Hatred also is a sign maker. Sign maker, which is in Pali, nimitta karana. The one that makes signs. Dosa, hatred, anger is a sign maker. So is moha, nimitta karana. So when the person is meditating on suññatā, they are moving or already have moved away from these three, the three kileshas, the three defilements of the heart. But to what? They move to the animitta, to the appanihita, and to suññatā. As we see from Venerable Dhammadina, when she was being questioned by her once upon a time husband, who was, by the way, an Agami, the householder Visakha, she says that when he's asking her, well, what does the mind lean into, spring forward to, leap into when they come out of the ninth jhana, the cessation of feeling and perception? And she says, it springs forward towards the animitta. It looks for that. That's where the comfort is, the safety is. It looks for the directionless, apanihita. It looks for the emptiness or the voidness, suññatā. So then the only agitation, and he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of the base of nothingness now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception now is no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation that he would then notice within him would be that of the six sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. This is key. When a person reaches this level, as we know from the suttas, we can understand that so long as they're still alive, they still have to be using the six senses, because those are the things that are necessary conditions for life to happen. And that itself is what this person comes down to, despite the fact that they have experienced animitta ceto vimukti, the liberation of the heart through the signless. He then knows and sees that his perceiving is empty of the perception of the base of nothingness, as well as the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that it is due to the perception of the six sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, what are the agitation causing factors? In this case, it's the six sense spheres. Then emptiness is perceived, and whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of the base of nothingness, nor paying attention to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, gives attention instead to the single perception, that of the signless collectedness of the heart. Again, this is the same. You don't need to be confused about what. There's a reason why is the Lord Buddha is listing this particular meditation, because this is the highest concentration that one can develop. This is beyond the eighth jhana, by the way. This is the animitta ceto vimutti, which we also see in the suttas where Venerable Mahamoggallana is explaining the way he had attained in the Iddhipada Sutta series from the Samyutta Nikāya. So I think I've done at least one of them with you in the past. So that meditation technique is being used here. That perception is still there for him to go into this suññatā state. By having only this single perception of the signless collectedness of the heart, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. You need to be using some object of meditation. When you're meditating, we use. Now it becomes more, it's a knack. Meditation is a knack. I've said this many times. We develop it the more we practice it. And every once in a while, with the help of one's teacher, you might have to tweak it, or the teacher has to tweak it to be precise, guiding you until you get to a point where it starts to unfold. And once the person is developed so much, then they will sit and practice. They will walk in practice. They will lie down in practice. They will stand in practice. But nevertheless, they will have a favorite practice. But when they want to go deeper into, and that usually comes in the form of sitting practice, where the mind, unless we're talking about arahants and unless we're talking about Buddhas or Pacceka Buddhas, the sitting practice is going to be necessary for this state. And he sees and understands that even this state of signless collectedness of the heart is dependent on conditions being artificially prepared, sankata, and thus made possible through the volitional means of thought. This is crucial to understand. That even, he understands that even this very sublime state of animitta ceto vimutti is requiring a set of conditions. See the beauty of the Dhamma? In other religions, everybody's waiting to throw in the towel, to say, yes, I've reached it, or just, put the bags down, kick their shoes off and say, we made it, yes. In the Dhamma, see how it's constantly unfolding. There's a purpose. I've mentioned to you many times, there's a graduation date, arahantship. But prior to that, the work is diligent that one must engage in. Heedfulness, appamada has to be present. Appamada in this case, being diligent in your heedfulness, requires you to not give up and unlayer. It's the image I get is when I was a child and my parents would have, let's say, every once in a while, we would have fish, which was a big deal because we came from, we weren't wealthy. So sometimes the fish would have a lot of thorns in it. So in my eagerness, I would try to bite pieces of the fish without having done due diligence in removing the bones out. And then I realized it comes at a price. If I'm going to eat this fish, then I need to be heedful and make sure that really, really there is no bones left. Because sometimes you would remove the big ones and then you would say, yeah, this is good, yeah. And then you would start even swallowing and something is caught and you feel like you're going to choke and die. Well, there's one person who's responsible ultimately, and that is the person who thought that they had done all the scrutinizing, but they hadn't. So similarly here, the person knows and understands that this is also artificially prepared, fabricated, constructed, habitually made, knowing full well that whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is inevitably impermanent and sooner or later will come to an end. And on seeing this directly through understanding, his heart finds release from the mental contaminant of sensual desire, the mental contaminant of becoming, and the mental contaminant of ignorance. These are the three asavas: kamasava, bhavasava, and avijjasava. These are the final finish line. These three. Why though? Why would he at this point realize? Because he's realizing anicca. That despite the sublime, beautiful states that he, well, even this one, animitta ceto vimutti, he still is not an arahant yet. And he knows that if he comes out of it, and when he comes out of it, yes, he's not like any other people around him, fine, but he knows that he's not yet freed, liberated, released from the asavas. So that interaction, remember what I was talking about, the gaps between the attainments. What was that? What was that? What was that? What was that attitude, the curiosity of probing into those moments where there's nothing? And now he sees Animitta Ceto Vimutti. This is like the highest concentration. Even that is dependent on conditions, me putting the effort to bring it about. That also is impermanent. Oh my. At that moment, the directly understanding of the Dhamma takes place. And for such a person, Lord Buddha says, being released thus, the direct knowledge arises in him. I am released, as he understands and knows it for himself. Now, birth is finally destroyed. The holy life is fully lived. What should be done is now done. And there is no more coming to any state of becoming. And he understands that whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the mental contaminants of sensual lust now are no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the mental contaminant of becoming now are no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the mental contaminant of ignorance now are no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation, excuse me, the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of the 6 sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. He then knows and sees that his perceiving is empty of the mental contaminant of sensual lust, which is no longer present in him, empty of the mental contaminant of becoming. He's doing a checkup. He's looking, he's doing quality control, if you will, to use a mundane verbiage. Empty of the mental contaminant of becoming, which is no longer present in him, and empty of the mental contaminant of ignorance. That is no longer present in him. This is a task that each meditator must do. Do I still have those tendencies in me? Instead of being, functioning on wishful thinking, many meditators do that. Oh, I must be at this level. No, drop all that. Ask yourself the crucial questions. Do I still have anger in me? Do I still have asati, unmindfulness or mindlessness in me? Am I forgetful? Am I breaking precepts? In what conditions? What situations? Why? Those questions can only come from you ultimately. Need to, in fact, come from you. He therefore understands that there is in him this state of non-empty presence that is due to the perception of the 6 sense spheres, which are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. So he sees and understands that whatever is thus not present, then due to that emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. So he knows, and he's not living in delusion. He knows that this body is still present. The 6 senses are still present. In other words, the 5 aggregates are present. But he's no longer holding on to them. And whenever he removes himself from that by secluding himself and going into this meditation, they are experiencing the fullness of the emptiness. Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmins who in the past have entered into and remained. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one line. Ananda, this itself is the bhikkhu's genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness that comes forth within him, which is transcending and supreme. Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmins who in the past have entered into and remained in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, all have done so by entering into and remaining in this same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins who in the future will enter into and remain in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, all will do so by entering into and remaining in this same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins who currently enter into and remain in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, all do so by entering into and remaining in this same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. So, whether in the past, whether in the future, or whether in the present, whoever's entering into this state is doing so by following these steps. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves in this manner by reflecting. We too will enter into and remain in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. This is what the Blessed One said, and the Venerable Ananda was delighted in listening to the Blessed One's words. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. This is an encouragement for all bhikkhus coming straight from Lord Buddha to be practicing suññatā. And how many bhikkhus are in fact really doing it? Any bhikkhu, Theravadan especially, like Venerable Bhante was advocating for this and similar suttas. There's a few other suttas, not just those, of course, but where Lord Buddha is so, and actually he was also saying in the future, when he is asked as to what will be the sasana like in the future, Lord Buddha says how the Sangha will move away from talking about suññatā proper. What will they do instead? What you see them doing now when you look around you. So it's sad that Bhante Jnanananda himself, bringing this to the attention, he was persecuted by the bhikkhus in Sri Lanka and elsewhere, being treated as a heretic. But that's what Lord Buddha said. You don't have to take Bhante Jnanananda's word for it, my word for it. You have to take the Buddha's word for it. And that's where the suttas come in. This is your life. This is very personal. You're the only one who could do it. So I will pause here and see if there are any questions. And again, I don't understand why the technical difficulties were going on, but hey, we survived somehow. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a very difficult sutta. If I were to try to understand it, basically sutta is describing the instruction by the Buddha given to Ananda on the meditative experience of higher jhanas. And I am really a beginner in the meditation. Using your simile on crawling, walking, and running, I think I'm probably at the stage of just trying to learn how to lift up my head. So, without understanding even the first 4 jhana, it will be very difficult to try to comprehend the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th jhana. I probably can only try to understand it through concepts. Based on what I read from Bhante Punnaji's book, basically the first 4 jhana is working on the absorption and trying to calm the chitta part of the mind. And when they reach the fourth jhana, it is where chitta and mano become balanced, or he used the term in consonance. And from the fifth jhana onwards, it's basically trying to stop the thinking mind. I'm not sure whether my interpretation is correct.
Was that it? Did you have more things to add? That's it?
Because I think experientially, I think I probably will not be able to reach that understanding.
Okay. Could you mute yourself now so that, because it sounds like it's resonating or bounding back. Well, the problem is what you stated. Conceptually, that has been the problem with many of those individuals who have been listening to teachers, including Bhante Punnaji, who happened to be my teacher for some time before he died, where they thought that by understanding things conceptually, it would be tantamount to going as deep and understanding Dhamma personally and directly. That is never the case. Unfortunately, many people are stuck because they have fallen in love with their concepts, with their abstractions. With all due respect to Bhante Punnaji and what he meant to myself and to many, many people, the highest regard must be paid not to Bhante Punnaji, to myself, or to any other bhikkhu, but to the Dhamma, to Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Not Sangha as in the people that you see around walking around in robes necessarily. The Mahasangha, who happen to be the noble disciples who've actually attained it. So, I know you've raised this question when I was in Malaysia a few times, and I know that you have this fascination with suññatā and also the abstractions and concepts. Unfortunately, the teacher's job had always been, or fortunately, to shake the student into reality instead of coaxing and caressing and just, petting the ideological and conceptual things and equating those as pure and genuine Dhamma. They will never be. That's why many, many, many people are stuck when they have had genuine interest in the Dhamma. Dhamma is practical. It's not conceptual. So we use concepts and language at a very bare minimum. It should be bare minimum, not the other way around. What we do see, however, whether it was Bhante Punnaji or others like him, was this over-fascination with concepts and language, which, by the way, kept on changing from one week to the next when Bhante would decide to change what his understanding was of the Pali term, let's say. Again, this is not to sully Bhante Punnaji in any way, but the Dhamma must be protected. How do we protect it? By, at the very least, going at and back to the suttas and trying to understand it through our own pragmatic, which leaves the concepts out, which means what? The meditative process. The meditative process. So I would have issues, let's say, with even in the case of Bhante Punnaji's, for example, he would say, after you reach a certain stage of jhanas, you cannot go beyond it. He would, at the most, from what I remember, the fourth jhana, you need to relinquish the home life. You have to go forth. You have to relinquish and become a monk. That is absolutely erroneous statement, because you do not see that in the suttas. I was mentioning earlier Visakha, the husband, one-time husband of Venerable Lady Dhammadinna, Ayya Dhammadinna, in the suttas. He was asking her about attainments that he himself, as a layperson, had attained, including the state of neither perception, the state of cessation of feeling and perception. How is that possible then? So you have monks who were completely avoiding looking at the suttas to not address the issue at hand that a layperson could attain, not just the jhanas, but also attain the first, second, and third. So if I had known you back then, I would have said what I've been saying to you, Theo, for the last year and a half, that you can attain at the very least, despite the fact that you say that you're at the stage of only lifting your head. I believe, yes, I believe, I have confidence that if you do practice and leave those conceptual jargon behind and stop using them as a hurdle for you, you yourself, in this very life, Lord Buddha says, in this very birth of yours, attain to, at the very least, Sotapatti. Not concepts. Not concepts. Any bhikkhu who says that a layperson cannot attain because of the fact that they are lay people, they should disrobe, or at least put away the mic. At the very least, stay away from talking about the Dhamma, because we would be misrepresenting the Dhamma. That's not right for our sake. The Dhamma, as in the Alagadupama Sutta, Lord Buddha says, you do not mess around with the Dhamma. You do not, like holding the most venomous snake, water snake, from its tail. You do not do that with the Dhamma. You hold it from the head, meaning you have to understand the Dhamma proper, which means one has to put their ego aside, their concepts aside, and sit down and practice before they speak to understand what they're talking about, if it is true or not, instead of conjuring up new terminologies every weekend for people to go ahead and worship, which is what has happened in KL especially, and throughout Asia. Unfortunately, people have become worshipers of words, concepts, instead of the practice. And all I saw was suffering after suffering in people's eyes in their personal interviews that I had with them. Pain and suffering, and I see dukkha. Dukkha. And what is this Dhamma is all about? What is it all about? Why did Lord Buddha spend 45 years of his life teaching? Dukkha from back then is dukkha now. Ignorance from back then is ignorance from now. So I don't want to give up on Theo. I do not give up on Theo. That's why my job is to shower you with as much I can of Dhamma, the way I understand it, and sharing it until you relinquish those wrong views, that you are still simply a crawling person lifting your, that's something I do not believe in. You have thirst for Dhamma, and that is plenty to start with. But you need to meditate. Don't move when you sit to meditate. Observe the hindrances. They are your teachers. Don't run, don't try to destroy them head on without understanding why. What is my attachment to these things? And read the suttas, not some commentaries, despite the writer saying that they are against commentaries, by the way. They themselves have become the greatest of commentators in modern time, which is ludicrous. Study the suttas, nothing else. Even keep these Dhamma discourses that I give to a minimum, unless you need to hear something. It's not clear in the suttas. Then go ahead, if I've covered it or some other person, then listen. But primarily the suttas are the way to go.
Thank you, Bhante.
Any other thoughts and questions?
Bhante, that Sutta, what you're saying is about the jhanas and that Sutta at the end, well, throughout the Sutta, he's referring to the recluses and the Brahmins. So they're not the bhikkhus, are they? So
Was that your question?
No, I'm just saying,
Ah.
like, I'd like you maybe to elaborate a little bit on that, because would they that would include just lay people as well?
Well, that's a good question, because context is often missing in modern translations of the suttas. Let's just put that out there first. And in coming to your question, always look at who is the questioner, meaning who is the audience to whom Lord Buddha was addressing in answering his question. Venerable Ananda had relinquished his life as a royal, as a prince himself. And he had been struggling. He had already attained to Sotapatti, but he had been slacking off because he was the attendant to Lord Buddha's. He thought, hey, Sotapatti, it's better than nothing. I'm good. I'm good. At the most, I have 7 more lives. I'm okay. I'm better than Putujanas over there. So in that case, we need to look at the reasons or possible reasons and the contextual layering of when we hear Lord Buddha say something. Who is he saying it to? And what is he trying to say as a teacher, as a conscientious, compassionate, empathetic teacher that he was? He's trying to shake Ananda, to get him out of his curiosity. He might have just come in to ask, with just plain curiosity, superficial. Bhante, that thing that you said one time, that you're practicing shunyata, was that true? He might have just wanted to know that and walk away. And here is Lord Buddha pulling from his ear and saying, come over here, Ananda. This is my opportunity to teach you a few things. You need to sit down and meditate. And this is how you do it. This. Because Ananda was drooling, metaphorically speaking, of course, whenever he came across his half-brother, Anuruddha. Whenever he saw his other fellow bhikkhus who had all become arahants, except for him. And he felt miserable. But then he kept himself busy because he was the attendant of Lord Buddha and he was memorizing all these suttas also. So there's that factor. And the other factor is, no, it's not only for recluses, as I was just mentioning to Theo about the example of Visakha. And not just Visakha, you also had Hattaka of Alavi and General Singha, among others, who were highly developed in their meditation practice, because I've also heard some bhikkhus over the past, well, in my past, associating with bhikkhus for the greater part of the last 3 decades in my life, where I've come across not just once, but several times, where bhikkhus and scholars and well-respected in their field would say that a layperson cannot attain these highest levels. And of course, as a good student should be, I would go and look for them in the suttas, and I would not find a single iota of evidence that proves that. That is their cultural biases of elitism, of putting us and them. No, it's not just for recluses. And by the way, you could be a very much of a layperson, but still a recluse. I know most bhikkhus actually do not live the recluse lifestyle, even though we are based on the suttas, we're supposed to be called samana, but we're not samana, in all honesty, in all factuality, actuality. Unless you're talking about those very select, beautiful, bright beads of diamond within the Sangha that are so hard to find. Otherwise, you could be a layperson and be one of those. And by the way, Brahmin is another term that oftentimes is misunderstood. Brahmin is not, Lord Buddha never talked about Brahmins as the highest echelon of Indian society. Lord Manu, those break, the echelons of caste systems. No, he's not talking about that. Brahmins, not even, Brahmin is basically nobility. And in the Sutta Nipata suttas that special, other suttas as well, but because I've just worked on them recently, the last 8 months, you see how Brahmins, one after the other, come and try to ask the Lord Buddha, what is a Brahmin? What is a Brahmin? What is a Brahmin? Because they were Brahmins. And Lord Buddha's insistence is always on the action, the intentional action of the person that makes a person a Brahmin or a non-Brahmin. Somebody who is highborn versus somebody who is lowborn. It's not the birth, by the way. It's not going to make, King Charles be a noble. That's never going to happen. Never. No nobility in Europe or anywhere on the planet is actually noble as far as the Dhamma is concerned. None of them. Unless, of course, they live with pure sila. Unless, of course, they purify their minds. Unless, of course, they have wisdom. They have these three, they're a noble person in the book of the Dhamma, according to the Dhamma. So that was the recluse. I said, now this is the Brahmin portion of your question that I'm trying to answer. So your intentional actions, your cetana, sancetana, are the very things that will turn you noble. Even if you came, Leonardo da Vinci, not to bring, it's banal of an example, but still it's a poignant one, I think. He was a bastard, considered a bastard, meaning he was not lawfully produced, meaning the child of a mother and a father who were married together. So he was the product of a union out of wedlock. So throughout his life, he was treated as, a leftover, somebody who was not even. He was not right. It was improper. He was not a Brahmin. And yet you have him in his pages of history and science being such a big giant. Again, this is a very banal example, but that came to mind as to birth and what makes a person. Is it Brahmin by birth? No, it's not. Of course, they like to advocate that it is. The elitists, that's what they push for. That's not it. And the elitism does not refer to only for royalty and monarchies and things like that. You can add CEOs and bhikkhus to that category. I hope that is able to satisfy your.
Thank you, Vante.
Any other thoughts and questions? Okay, let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasana. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desana. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you and all your loved ones. May your physical, emotional, psychological, and all kinds of suffering be reduced. And may the smile come back to your hearts, to your faces. And may you be forgiving of yourselves, of all the wrong things that you see happening. May you have a softness in your gaze and try to mimic the soft gaze of Lord Buddha. Be well. Sukhi Hotu.